and welcome back to Franklin Covey's twice weekly podcast on leadership with Scott Miller. That's me. I'm your host now for 6 years, twice weekly on Tuesdays and Fridays. On behalf of the Franklin Covey Company, I'm privileged to sit on this stool and in this studio in Salt Lake City, Utah, and interview and have conversations with many of the world's most influential thought leaders. In some cases, they are authors, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, intrapreneurs. They are CEOs, they are leaders at all levels of organizations. Sometimes they are scientists and academics, people that are building businesses or researching topics that they're fascinated with, all in the collective effort to make you a better leader. Our co-founder of Franklin Covey, Stephen Covey, of course, wrote the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So one of the missions of this podcast is to shine Franklin Covey's bright spotlight as the world's most trusted leadership brand on people that can make you more effective. Sometimes it's people that have, insights into traumas or personal tragedies, and they've summoned the courage and vulnerability to talk about it. And then there's just the iconic entrepreneurs that you know their name and you know of them, but perhaps haven't had access to them. And that is the nature of today's podcast. Reid Hoffman is here, household name, a well-known venture investor in technologies. He is the co-founder of LinkedIn, somewhere where all of us spend a lot of our time, me included. Reid, of course, is well known as a thought leader and futurist, if you will, on technology. And today, he is releasing a new book with his co-author, Jeff Beto, called Super Agency: What Could Possibly Go Right with Our AI Future? Joining us from Northern California today, Reid Hoffman, welcome to On Leadership.
It is a great pleasure to be here, and I've been a admirer of the various leadership work that you guys do, and I think it's a very important way that we elevate humanity through thoughtful, kind of wise, compassionate leadership. And so I think what you guys do is awesome. So I'm completely delighted.
Reid, I appreciate that. No doubt you and our CEO have many topics you could think about and collaborate and co-create as well too. You've written this new book called Super Agency. We're going to spend most of our time talking about it. Everyone's got an opinion or a fear or an idea of how AI is going to impact their life, professionally, personally, the future, humanity, our world, perhaps our existence. There's a lot of doom and gloom books out there. There's a lot of books on how to make more money, how to create more efficiency. And you have written this very interesting book about what could go right. We'll talk about that in just a few moments. First, I'd like you to indulge our audience around the world and maybe rewind a couple of decades, a couple $1 billion ago, and maybe talk about your own journey. People will be fascinated to hear kind of, where you're from, where you started, what were your passions. Obviously, you are a well-known tech investor. You're on the board of Microsoft. You obviously are an investor and thought partner to OpenAI. You have access to the world's most, incredible minds. Don't shortchange us. Spend a few minutes and tell us how you got here today.
So I had the great luck of being born in the Stanford Hospital. I'm a fourth generation Californian, which is not completely uncommon, but also not common either. And going to Stanford, I got exposure to kind of how technology can be an Archimedean lever to really make the world move in amazing ways. And I wouldn't have thought about being a tech entrepreneur if I hadn't have gone to Stanford. Went to Oxford to study philosophy, and then decided, actually, in fact, did scale creation of software to help amplify humanity was the thing that was interesting to me, and that the commercial, kind of entrepreneurial model for doing it would be the right thing. And so I, came back, worked at a couple companies. People may have heard of them, Apple Computer, et cetera. Started my first startup called SocialNet, which it was not a success, but obviously the notion of how we are better as individuals and together, as I kind of put in my first book, The Startup of You, I plus we is the kind of the way to think of it, or I amplified to the we, and then have done a couple of companies. I was part of the founding team of PayPal, obviously a co-founder of LinkedIn, and then I've been, kind of instrumental, kind of a seed Series A investor in a number of other companies, Airbnb, Facebook, and others. And so, that's kind of where I am now as kind of a partner of Greylock and, kind of a center to what's going on with artificial intelligence and what does it mean for us in our lives, in our work, in kind of humanity. And that's the very quick, kind of biographical arc. And obviously, I always hope that the future is going to be even better than what I've done so far, because you're kind of building on it and trying to help be a great participant in where we're going as society, as an industries, and as the human race.
Reid, thank you for that. FranklinCovey is a leadership partner to organizations around the world, building healthier cultures, helping leaders become more trustworthy, better communicators, more effective, in essence, to build workplaces of choice for achievers with heart. What we're not are investigative journalists. We're not hard-hitting journalists, and nor am I. This podcast is meant to be a place where innovators, explorers, thinkers, thought leaders can come and talk about it. And so we assume good intent in everyone. And we also select our guests that we think have, similar values and morals that we do, certainly that of our founder. With that premise, I'd like to open up, it's not secret that you are a heavy investor in AI, right? I mean, you are at the very foundation of OpenAI, and you talk with the leaders that are your peers on an hourly basis. And so I'm going to guess there is probably some suspicion that will come about from reading your book and following you around. Well, Reid's just trying to make $50 more billion. My sense is you have enough billions. My sense is you've moved into a broader mission and purpose. But for those who may have a suspicion around your intent, I'd like to just kind of carte blanche, give you a chance to say, why did you write this book? What is your passion and intent when it relates to your focus and how you, Reid Hoffman, are helping to shepherd the impact that AI is going to have on all of our lives and my children's lives and their children's lives? Take that anywhere you'd like to go.
Well, writing books are not a way to make a ton of money. I focus on companies, and my focus is kind of like, how do we elevate humanity? And if I thought that there was better ways to do that, I would do something different, and I wouldn't be investing in and doing AI. It doesn't mean that I actually think that capitalism and business and commerce can be a great way to elevate humanity. I think we've done it in multiple ways. I mean, I think the entire kind of productivity and industrial revolution is part of what has enabled a broad middle class and literacy and health for an expansion of the human race. And so I think it's a great thing to do, but it's not, like I avoid businesses that I think are even neutral to kind of the elevation of humanity. If I was, kind of purely doing economics, I'd probably be doing cryptocurrencies. I do a little bit of them because I think they can be positive, but the AI is kind of giving us superpowers as human beings and being able to make society better, the same way, that you could think of the Industrial Revolution as having given us physical superpowers, like we can construct more buildings, we can do more transport, we can have geographic mobility freedom, we can manufacture enough things that you can have broad middle classes in many societies around the world, and you can be expanding them. I think kind of part of the reason I'm doing AI is that same thing as a cognitive industrial revolution, where we can be enabling human beings to do a lot more. And yes, I think that it's a good thing to be investing commercially, to be making money in it, the same way that kind of capitalism is a form of humanism in terms of creating jobs, creating products and services, creating wealth and prosperity in societies to enable broad-based public education, to enable medicine. I have the same point of view with economic investing, but it comes out of the same motive, as opposed to the motive being making money is the reason why you go and promote a product.
Reid, your current book is called Super Agency, and a grounding concept in the opening of this book is a collection of words I've never heard used together. And I'm going to repeat them twice because most of our listeners and viewers have not put them together, and have you then just riff on them. You speak to this idea, what you call a techno-humanist compass. Techno-humanist compass. What the heck is that, and why do people care? And is it more of an individual application or an organizational concept? Take that anywhere you want to go for as much as you'd like.
So part of the reason why a compass is a kind of a, is kind of going to the old nautical metaphor. It's like kind of like, how do we decide how to go, how to move, how to decide? And part of what we get is kind of like with technology is an ability to enable us with superpowers, which can include mobility, right? Cars and planes and trains and auto. It's part of that kind of mobility, and the same thing is happening now, I think, with artificial intelligence, but as opposed to a physical GPS, it's an informational GPS. It's help us learn things, help us make decisions, help us articulate ourselves better, help us analyze things, help us produce more things. And that kind of, compass and ability, this kind of GPS system, is part of what's empowering. Now, it's both empowering as individual human beings. Like if you go play with ChatGPT and other things, you can realize that you can do more things now than you could do before. But it's also it's together. It's kind of as a society, because, like, for example, you say, "Well, when I get an automobile, I can drive more places, I can go more things." But by the way, when the doctor got the automobile, he could now have, or she could now have, a much broader range. I mean, historically, but can have a broader range of being able to visit patients, do home visits, etc. And so that becomes also enabling to you. And then as we together using technology, like kind of, for example, the Industrial Revolution, can then build amazing new capabilities into societies, wealth, prosperity, public services, public infrastructure, kind of all of that. And so it's both an amplifier of the individual and an amplifier of the group. And the techno-humanist is to remember that what we're trying to do here is we're trying to elevate humanity, and elevate humanity through technology. And we ourselves are, kind of, I've argued in that kind of geeky way that we're more homo techne than we are homo sapiens, because we elevate ourselves both literally and metaphorically through technology. Literally airplanes, but things like glasses, clothing, microphones, podcasting. All of this is tools and things that we then embody and participate in and amplify our humanity. And that's why you get a techno-humanist compass, because it's the remembrance to build technology, to shape technologies in ways that help us become more human. And that's actually what I believe we can do and are doing and will be doing with AI. And that's part of the reason why that's what we want the AI companies to be doing. That's what we want the products to be doing. And that's kind of the lens for, why write a book?
Reid, is the nature of AI such that people like you, like I'm not shepherding AI. I'm on the receiving end of learning it and learning people that are aggregating my books and podcasts and writing things in my voice. And so I have some, fear and suspicion about it. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But generally, are the Reid Hoffmans of the world building AI to automate and replace people? Or would you say more to augment and amplify people? I'm guessing it's the latter, but there are certainly well-founded fears. I was at a conference in New York a month ago by Keith Ferrazzi, the famous author that wrote, Never Eat Alone and Never Lead Alone. And Keith pulled together 100 CIOs and 100 CHROs to work together on the future of their companies. And a general theme of this group of, powerhouse people leaders and tech leaders was that in the not so distant future, robots are going to, quote, do all the work. AI is going to do all of the, intelligent thinking. And people are going to do all the social, emotional, relational stuff that may be a little bit doomsday-ish. That wasn't the nature of the thought. Like, is AI here to amplify, or is AI here to replace, or both?
So there will be some areas of replacement. Any area that, like, a human being is doing a job that they're trying to get the human being to be more like a robot, like customer service. You follow a script. The robots are better than that. Now, even then, I think the customer service job will change some. It'll be the architecture of kind of like, well, how do we have these really good experiences that actually are not just like brand recovery, but brand building in our interactions with customers? And I think that's part of what, companies like Sierra and others are already doing with AI and customer service. What I think though is that we will have many more areas of amplification than we fully anticipate. And by the way, on the other side of of kind of any major technological change, it's always hard to envision. So you always have some fear. I mean, like, for example, the way the phonograph was marketed is you can listen to church music at house now, and didn't realize that there'd be a whole, kind of recording industry and music and audiobooks and all of this other kind of thing that comes out of it. Like, each of these areas has well, we think this, but ends up with a much broader expression. I think AI will be the same. Now, if you went to oh my gosh, now it's only AI and robots doing all the work, and we don't have to do anything, and they're just like so much more capable that even in the collaborative thing of us working with them, we're like, kind of like, it's like your 5-year-old wants to work with you. Even in the science fiction, which is not a determined future, even then you go, well, there's things we can do. I mean, there's ways in which, the same way that, if you look at kind of like, is everyone part of like the European or other nobility society where you're putting on plays and you're having dinner parties and you're doing all this stuff as ways of kind of being of service and connection with each other, even in that. But my own depth of personal conviction, all of the technologies I see, the trajectory in which we're on, is that there's going to be tons of amplification. That if you went and go and plan, as opposed to kind of just thinking about AI as kind of the Hollywood movies, Terminator, et cetera, of coming with it, but go and play with ChatGPT and see what it can do for you in anything from, like, hey, what should I cook for dinner tonight, to, hey, I'm going to have this difficult conversation with a coworker, and how might I approach it, and how could I have that conversation in a much better way. All of these things you'll see right now, it's already showing amplification. And that, like, for example, one of the classic ones that obviously engineers and developers who are building AI think, well, is this just going to become, like, I don't need it to have engineers anymore, it'll just be AI engineering. That'll be the very first one that's kind of really intensely worked on. And I think what you'll see is that actually engineers will deploy with a set of co-pilot agents who will be helping them, and they will now be much more as kind of like a conductor with a bunch of agents doing something, and that the human will have center point of view there, from making judgments, from cross-checking to make sure it's right, for thinking about like what's the benchmark for making it quality, for fitting in to the company's work, for fitting into the team's work. And I think that's an instance of where we're going to see just a ton of amplification, and that we'll see a lot of that before, and along with some selective replacement, just like we've seen with every other technological revolution. So you can say, well, the horse and buggy, the person who is caring for the horse and driving the horse, unless you're going to Central Park, New York, doesn't really do that anymore. But now with cars, we have, just kind of like suburbs and tons of mobility, and cabs and all this other. And even with autonomous vehicle, you'll see a lot more of that going into the future. But that's what we should be steering towards. And part of the reason for writing Super Agency is say, well, what would be a human agency superpower design compass that would be the kind of thing we'd want as products and services, the kind of thing that we'd want to be in dialogue with new companies creating new products and services, and AI technology, and that human agency and super agency is the right way to kind of think about this and engage with it as individuals, as organizations, as press people, as government people, as technologists building these products.
Reid, 1984. George Orwell wrote a book 70 plus years ago. There's no shortage of books that are being introduced around AI. Like I said in my opening, most of them seem to be a little bit morose or funereal around, oh my gosh, we're going to die. Your book is actually called Super Agency. What could possibly go right with our AI future? What does super agency mean? Peel the onion on that, and maybe talk a little bit about what is the reader experience like when someone dives into the book? What's the premise, and what are you trying to teach us?
So super agency is what happens when millions of people gain access to a new, kind of superpower enabling technology. We've had them in the past. It's been everything from the written word to the printing press, electricity, cars, planes, just lots and lots. Medicine with penicillin, everything else. And super agency is what happens when, millions of us get access to it and start integrating into our lives, integrating the way that we interact with each other, that we navigate our own lives, that we come together in companies and societies, and how it elevates the entire human condition. That's what super agency is as kind of a definition and kind of a focus on human agency. Because, by the way, it's not new now that we suddenly go, okay, wait, I worry about my human agency being disrupted by this. The same discourse that we see around AI was the same discourse we saw around the printing press, we saw around the car, like all these things. Like, oh my gosh, this is gonna destroy human agency. This is gonna destroy human agency within society. And actually, when you look back, they're all amplifications of kind of our human agency, both individually and as a group. And so the book is kind of showing what is this kind of historical lens, because most people, we've so much integrated, cars and phones and the internet and glasses and everything else into our human identity and know how these extend and improve our human agency, that we have now as a society forgotten that we had the exact same discourse that we're having right now around AI. So it gives you some of that historical lens of understanding it. And then, like why it is, and by the way, 1984 was one of those, like, oh, we're gonna have these technologies of information and control, and you're gonna have this dystopia. And actually, in fact, the entire way it's played out, is individual and societal empowerment, ability to have more people speak, more people be able to be heard, not an autocratic controlling government. Even in places where you have autocratic controlling governments, which do use technology for that, but even the technological basis has still created a broad-based more ability for individuals to have agency, to learn things, to not be, kind of ants or robots under the control of the central government. And that's been the progress of all this technology, and that's what we can actually reliably predict with how artificial intelligence will play out. But of course, we shouldn't just sit back and wait for it. We should say, hey, human agency is what matters. And when we have these concerns of either job loss or misinformation or, control by, kind of autocratic entities, here is the way that we kind of steer towards having more human agency individually and together. And here are some of the principles and ways to engage in that. And so it's both this kind of historical retrospective with super agency and a set of kind of ways to think about it and to engage to have a very, much more elevated human future.
Reid, let's start with the premise that no one knows, including you. But if anybody knows, it would be you. Could you maybe go out on a limb and talk about what does our world look like 2, 5, 10, 20 years from now, without fear-mongering or being Pollyanna? There's millions of people that are watching and listening to this. And some of us are just starting to learn prompts and chat GPT, and other of us are starting to be fearful of, intellectual property rights, and is our job going to be taken, or is we're going to have a whole new economy? What is the rise of misinformation? And just recently we've learned about the role that AI played in the Tesla car bombing in Vegas, or whatever that was. Tesla wasn't involved, it was a Tesla car, and a terrorist, if you will. To clarify, will you just kind of prognosticate responsibly for the average guy or gal like me, 2, 5, 10, 20 years from now, what's going to happen?
So I do think that the transition periods when we have these new general purpose technologies can be quite stressful to a lot of people and to societies. So I don't mean to undercut the fact that transitions can be quite difficult. In each of the historical instances, printing press and cars and smartphones and everything else, like there is challenges in the transition, and AI will also have a bunch of them. Like as a job changes and is no longer the way that I used to do this job or what this job used to be, changes because AI now gives you a different way of being productive and capable in sales, marketing, engineering, legal, law, finance, every single area, even small business ownership. in every single area, it's like, well, shoot, I need to be learning this. I need to be deploying it. What happens if my competition is doing it stronger and faster than me? What does this mean for the nature of the organization? What does this mean for, kind of the talent engagement? How do we upskill people? All the rest of the stuff. There's just tons of areas where there will be strain and change, and like some people will have articles where some thousands of people have lost their job because the jobs have changed because of AI. And so I don't mean to undercut in kind of 2, 5, 10, 20 years that the transitions won't be difficult. Now, one of the good news is that AI is kind of the kind of technology that can help us with that. It can help us learn the new skills. It can help us do the new jobs. It can help us find the new jobs. And this is, said as one of the, co-founders of LinkedIn, who is still very bullish on LinkedIn's ability to help in all these things. I've always been how do we elevate human talent to their most capable contributions to their own lives, their family lives, their communities' lives, their society lives, the industry lives. That's obviously what the central mission of LinkedIn's all about, and kind of how do we engage LinkedIn to do that, and how do we engage other sources to do that. But the transitions will encounter a lot of difficulties for a lot of individuals, which is one of the reasons I'm coming out and saying, hey, start learning this now, because the most likely outcomes are job one is replaces a human being with a human being using AI. And I want as many of the human beings who are currently doing job one, who want to continue doing job one, whatever that is, to doing that, sales, marketing, engineering, all, management, all of the above, to be doing it with AI. And so getting that connection and that integration into doing this is, I think, one of the really central things. And so now part of what you'll see a lot of storm about like, oh my God, we got all these new AI tech tools this year in 2025. But human organizations and human societies don't just start using them overnight, even though in theory, because we all have a smartphone, we all have, a number of us have computers, that you could almost always start using all this stuff immediately. We as human beings start integrating it, start learning it, start figuring it out as an organization. So it won't take off on a super fast, like at the end of 2025, the end of 2026, every job will change. But on the other hand, when you get to 5, 10, 15 years, all of a sudden, a bunch of different, kind of micro changes will add up to macro changes, where suddenly it's like, well, no, actually, in fact, being a capable salesperson, being a capable marketer, being a capable leader, being a capable engineer, being a capable finance person, if you're not using AI as a fundamental part of your tool set, it's like you're trying to say, hey, I'm a professional and I don't have a smartphone. Hey, I'm a professional and I don't use any computational tools to enable me what I'm doing, and that's just not feasible these days. And so, kind of being in that, you can't say, hey, I'll just get to the end of my retirement, unless you're very, very close, and I won't need to engage in these tools. Yeah. So that transition, I think, really matters, and where it is exactly at 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, I think we're all discovering this together.
Reid, selfish question, but it just popped into my mind. If you were the CEO of FranklinCovey, or you were coaching our CEO as a member of our board, and you were identifying the competencies that leaders in organizations, frontline leaders, first-time leaders, mid-level, C-suite, it doesn't matter really. What are the leadership competencies that leaders in the next 20 years, during all these micro, transitions, are going to need to master leadership competencies as AI fundamentally changes the nature of their industry, their profit model, their engagement with clients, innovation, product development? What are some of the leadership skills you're going to need to see sweep companies that FranklinCovey should be teaching?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally it's a question of nimbleness and learning and experimentation with technology tools in how you do the complete stack of your work. It's how you function as an individual, but also how you function as teams and how you function as a company. So, for example, one of the articles I wrote for the MIT Press, Tech Review a number of years back, is it'll become a very standard thing by which every meeting you have an AI that's in the meeting, that's note-taking, that's bringing up questions and information for kind of like who else needs to be notified or consulted with, or, kind of what processes might need to change in this. And this is like just one kind of lens for thinking about like, how does AI change teamwork in terms of how you operate? And so then, part of obviously FranklinCovey is like, well, how do we get leadership in this? It's like, well, okay, how is this tool in a healthy, like elevating our productivity, elevating our company culture way integrated? And obviously a terrible way would be that we have surveillance that's giving you a performance score at the end of every meeting that's being recorded, because then it's like, oh, this is being used on me rather than for me and by me. And so we want to use the tools that are for me and by me, that are participation, that are helping us get elevated culture, get elevated performance. But you're going to have to be kind of constantly learning, because it's not like, oh, well, the AI that we finish, that we use in 2025, that's the AI for the next 10 years. One of the lines from Ethan Mullick's book that I really like is, the worst AI you're ever going to use is the AI you're using today. It's going to be improving. And so you have to have that nimbleness of changing your engagement as an individual, as a team, as a company with the technology, as the new capabilities are emerging. And so it's kind of this individual and group learning exercise. And it's not like I wait for the book, it's I engage in the process for how you make that happen. And that's the kind of mindset, the kind of skill set, the kind of culture that companies are going to need to stay adaptive.
I know our time is tight. I have two more points I want to pitch to you. One is, you did something really cool recently. You had a virtual Skype call with yourself, but a former self. And I'm going to post this on FranklinCovey's social when it comes out with this podcast interview, because it was very cool. For those who have no idea what I'm talking about, because they haven't seen it, I think it's on YouTube. Talk a little bit about the call you created with your former self.
So one of the things that I think is a good general thing is say, oh, I'm going to get challenged by this new technology, in this case AI, and then think where the technology could be part of the solution or could be doing good things. And obviously, when people talk about deep fakes, it's almost like the word means bad. And I was like, well, what are the things that we could do with these digital twins that are actually, in fact, really, kind of healthy and human amplifying? And one of the things I wanted to show was to say, well, actually, in fact, like, since we want to have a learning mindset, what would be the way that we'd be engaging, with these technologies, which would help with the learning mindset? It's like, well, what if we had me having a call with kind of a GPT-enabled younger self, that we're talking about, like, what are our learning curves? How do we look about the past, the now, the future, and how do we learn into it? And then use this as a way of kind of exploring that and having that kind of interaction. And there's all kinds of ways in which AI can enable kind of human experience and human connectivity. I already kind of mentioned that one of the things is like, consult with ChatGPT on like, hey, how to have a difficult conversation if it's your tool available, just like you would consult with a leadership coach, or you consult with a friend in terms of how to do that. It's another agent, another tool to help you do that. And that was part of demonstrating that in the kind of creating the younger, Reid, who was just at the very beginning of the LinkedIn journey, saying, hey, what are the things that I should learn and do? And by the way, that helps me in the creation of that, thinking about like, what are the things that I've learned in a way that I would tell a younger version of myself? Because that's obviously things that are then helpful to tell other people too.
It was riveting. Like, I watched it twice because it was so riveting. I strongly encourage people to go find that on YouTube as well. Hey, let's end. Your book released today, Super Agency, What Could Possibly Go Right with Our AI Future. You're doing a couple of cool things. Your publisher is Authors Equity. Your co-author is Greg Beto. You've got some cool things going on with some custom covers. Would you talk a little bit about why and what that looks like, and how that's going to help with the impact of the book?
Well, so one of the things, again, thinking about like, how does AI enable new forms of human expression? One of the things we realized is it can actually, in fact, produce one-off books that are more deeply engaging. And this one is the simple first step on that, which is custom covers that are personalized to the individual. where it's like you are also a participant in the construction of this book and what it means for you, and which, kind of like bios and book blurbs and lenses you should bring to the book, and to make the book your book as well. And so this kind of making it able to do, as opposed to, because previous technologies, I could create a book, which is the same book for everybody, to in this kind of selected and way of starting and demonstrating how AI can be then more useful and personalized to individuals, and to show it in the kind of physical substance of the book cover and other elements.
That is a first for the publishing business, and leave it to you to introduce that into the genre. Reid Hoffman, man, what an honor. Thanks for joining us today. You are the co-founder of LinkedIn and many other useful technologies that we use every day in our life. The good news is all of our lives and jobs are changing, hopefully for the better, and everybody should be on the lookout for sort of the measured impact, of micro wins as our world begins to change, hopefully for the better, to augment and amplify, not to automate and replace. Although in some cases that will be better for all of us as well. Reid Hoffman, thanks for joining us today. You're a class act.
A pleasure and an honor. I look forward to the next.
And we'll see you back here next week for a new conversation on leadership.